Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show.
Welcome in, Matt Bernier Show, Friday, September the 9th, 2016 from Midtown Manhattan. I'm going to give you the heads up already. I'm Matt Bernier if you're new to this whole shindig. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Going to give you the heads up already. I think we've got a good show here put together, but the problem is there's all sorts of construction going on outside, so it's going to sound like there's a tornado in the background occasionally. I apologize in advance for that. If you're watching on live.drf.com, if you're listening the podcast version, you have YouTube, you have SoundCloud, you have drf.com, you have iTunes. There's a bunch of different ways for you to find out. It's right there at the bottom of the graphic. You can see, throw iTunes in there at some point. But so here we are. We do this thing every Friday, noontime, right about that. Occasionally it's a half hour, occasionally it's an hour. Today is going to be kind of the recap of Saratoga and Del Mar as far as the summer meeting at Del Mar is concerned. Everything is done, buttoned up. We're going to kind of give the superlatives. Remember, I hope most of you, or at least have gone through high school at this point. If you haven't, you're probably going down the wrong path if you're watching a gambling show. But if you've gotten through high school and you've gotten through college, you have these sort of year-end, yearbook things, your superlatives. Well, guess what? Well, let's have the meat-end superlatives. And let's just start off right at the top with Saratoga. We'll go Saratoga first, then we'll go to Del Mar, then we'll wrap things up with the normal preview and review. And we'll also throw in, look, it's football time. Last night was the opener with the Broncos and the Panthers. A disappointing game for me, but at the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference. We're going to give you 3 plays for this week, and we'll do that for the rest of the time going on. So the timing will be a little bit janky, and at the end of the day, the background noise, hopefully it's to a minimum, but I can't guarantee and promise anything about that. Let's start off with Saratoga's superlatives. And basically, I'm just going to give you the divisional kind of things, the way I'm looking at it. 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, older horses, performances, X, Y, and Z, and maybe we'll be able to take a look at a few of them. Let's start off with the kids, the 2-year-olds, 2-year-old males. I don't think there's any question at this point in the game. Syndergaard, in my opinion, was the most impressive 2-year-old male that we saw up at Saratoga over the summer. And I understand he has not won a graded stakes race, and he's never even raced in a graded stakes race. But the way that he won so impressively both of his starts, and I understand that funny side, that was on New York, sort of New York bred day anyway, the showcase day, if you will, the day before the Travers. I know it was on a wet track, and he won by, the length of the stretch. But at the end of the day, he looked so impressive first time out. He looked so impressive winning the funny side on August the 26th. I just think this horse has got a lot of things going for him, and it's time. I'm sure they're going to test him in some sort of an open race. I would imagine something like the Champagne. Or maybe they want to try and go 2 turns with him. Maybe they send him down to Keeneland to get ready for a race like the Breeders' Cup, or find out if 2 turns is going to be in his wheelhouse. At the end of the day, you look at the pedigree. I know he's a New York bred, but Majestic Perfection out of a Gold Case mare. They paid $450,000 for him. Syndergaard is a very intriguing prospect going forward. I think he's going to be one that we all need to keep our eye on for Todd Pletcher. Who else? It's got to be Pletcher. Pletcher or Brown with 2-year-olds on the East Coast. You really can't go wrong there. I think Syndergaard was the 2-year-old male of the meet up at Saratoga. As far as the girls are concerned, this is an interesting sort of choice on my part, I'd think anyway. And please, if you agree, disagree, think I'm an idiot, dope, whatever you want to say, or you think I'm a genius, I'm always going to be open to that. At Bernier_Matt on Twitter. I think Coasted was the best 2-year-old female as far as Saratoga is concerned, and I know that she's done most of her work on the turf, or her good work anyway. Her career debut was just kind of blah. That was on the dirt, and they immediately went over to the turf with her. She was so visually impressive winning that maiden 2-back, going 2 turns, and that's never an easy thing for a 2-year-old to do. But then she came right back in the P.G. Johnson. I thought she was fantastic that day. She was in behind horses, had all sorts of trouble, and she was bet down to 3-5 like she couldn't lose that day. She looks like she could be the real deal, and we'll actually get to see her big sister later on today. And at the end of this show, we normally throw it to the formulated race the day for Friday, and we're going to. It's the Christie Cat from Belmont Park, opening day at Belmont today. Her big sister is going to be running in that spot, Malibu Stacy, full sister, and they're going to try the turf with her for the first time for George Weaver, and I can't blame them. I think you look at this, I think Leah Germati's got a really nice filly on her hands right here in Coasted. There's no reason to think that she's not on the short list anyway as far as favorites at this point for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. She looks the part. She can be forwardly placed. She can come from a little bit farther out of it. I think Coasted is the goods, and I think Leah's got a good one. Bite his way out of a Malibu Moon mare. Coasted for me, the 2-year-old filly of the meet at Saratoga this year. Let's move on to the 3-year-old males. And I understand there are plenty of 3-year-old specific and restricted races up at the spa, but the big one, and the big one for the entire meeting, males, females, older, younger, 3-year-old, whatever you want to call it, the big race is the Midsummer Derby. It's the Travers. And at the end of the day, the performance possibly of the year thus far, even more so than Frosted's Met Mile, might have been Arrogate winning the Travers. I don't want to give it all away. We may see him again in a few minutes momentarily, but I think Arrogate, his performance in the Travers, Baffert's always thought highly of this horse, and he just had never really... He had run fast races, don't get me wrong. He got a 103 Beyer 3-back, he got a 99 prior to his Travers victory, but he was facing weak competition. He was winning in short fields, he was doing it in uncontested fashion on the lead, setting glacial fractions. I didn't know if he could do all this other stuff. I thought he was a legitimate player going into the Travers, but I didn't know. I picked the other Baffert horse, and Arrogate made me pay with a 122 Beyer speed figure. They paid over $500,000 for him way back at the Keeneland September sale in 2014. Arrogate looks like he could be the goods. The question now going forward is going to be, was that 122 legitimate, or is it a scenario where he's probably not quite that 122? Maybe, heck, even if he's a 110, he's going to be a superstar. But if he's that 122, I think everybody could be in trouble as far as the Breeders' Cup Classic is concerned, and it sounds like that's the way that Bob Baffert wants to go, train Arrogate up to the Classic. We'll probably be seeing Arrogate momentarily when we talk about the performance of the meeting. Let's move on to the 3-year-old fillies. What else is there to say? She's 10 for 10. She's perfect. She's never really been challenged at any point. Songbird, we're going to take a look at her victory in the Alabama. I believe this was on August the 20th. Let's take it from the top of the lane.
They're into the stretch, and here she comes. Songbird's got a 4-length lead as they come into the final furlong. Mike Smith just shakes the reins at Songbird. Going for broke, has made progress up into second inside a family tree, but they're 6 lengths behind Songbird at the 16th pole. It is Songbird, this magnificent filly, winning the Alabama. She is a perfect 10.
There's only so many things you can say about her until you just run out of stuff. At that point, you just start drolling on and on and on. It doesn't really matter. She's 10 for 10. She's almost earned $3 million at this point in her career. It sounds like she has a date coming up in the Cotillion with Catherine Sophia, who was the winner of the Kentucky Oaks, and I'm still a little bit dubious about Catherine Sophia going 2 turns. I didn't love her going into the Oaks. That's why I didn't play her, but I think everyone will acknowledge that she may be the most talented, the second most talented filly that Songbird will have to face thus far, considering she ran into Karina Mia 2-back. Karina Mia, that may have broken her a little bit, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, in shows to come whenever Karina Mia does show back up to the races. But Songbird is just fantastic. She's proven anywhere between 6 furlongs and 10 furlongs. She's a Grade 1 winner between 7 and 10 furlongs, and that really is kind of the hallmark of a superstar, of a real top upper echelon horse. If you can win a graded stakes race sprinting, and I understand it was last year as a 2-year-old, and you can win not only at a route of ground, but at a route of ground going 10 furlongs, 1.25 miles. She hasn't done anything wrong. I believe the smallest margin of victory in her career, if I'm looking at the past performances right now, is tied between the Santa Isabel and the Santa Anita Oaks when she won by 3 3/4 lengths. Those are the 2 smallest margins of victory in her career. And by the way, she was geared down in both. She's fantastic. There's not a lot else to say other than if she can get through a race like the Cotillion, they'll go on to the Breeders' Cup Distaff. She'll be one of the choices in a very, very salty edition of the Breeders' Cup Distaff, because it sounds like you may have Beholder, you may have Stellar Wind, maybe you have Cavorting, maybe you have a couple of these other big mares that are pretty good. Songbird, for me, very clearly the 3-year-old female of the meeting up at Saratoga this year. Let's move on. Now, this is where things may get a little bit questionable for some people at home watching or listening to the show. Older male. I think everyone would just chalk it up and say Flintshire, or Flintshire, however you'd like to pronounce it, is the way to go, and he's going to be, I'm not going to argue with that. I could have easily picked him, but instead, I decided to go with AP Indian, a horse that, he's taking control of a division that felt like it was just in disarray and no one wanted to take the ball and run with it. AP Indian decided, I'm the one. Arnaud Delacour's in a fantastic job, and here he is winning the Forego most recently.
AP Indian to the front. She flying second and giving way now. And then it's Stall Walking Dude in third, followed by Limousine Liberal on the inside. AP Indian has run away to a 2.5-length lead as Stall Walking Dude has moved up into second. Tamarcou's late on the scene. He's second now. But AP Indian is coming home to victory again in the Forego.
Have to look at AP Indian as a legitimate threat, if not the outright favorite for the Breeders' Cup Sprint at this point. Maybe we get one more race, maybe something like the Fosberg as a prep to lead into Southern California and Santa Anita Park, where the Breeders' Cup will be this year. There's not a lot to knock about this horse. He's versatile. He can sit just off the pace, and that was my biggest knock about him going into this year was he is brilliant. No one can argue that as far as speed figures are concerned, but at the end of the day, he hadn't passed a parked car. He's done that multiple times now. He looks like he's the real deal. He can go fast. He can sit just off of a fast pace, and that can work so well at a place like Santa Anita, where we've seen that, you know what, speed is obviously going to play there. He doesn't have to be out right on the lead going 21-3 and sub 44, but he can sit just off and still make up ground. AP Indian for me, the older male of the meeting. The older female of the meeting for me, again, this was a situation where cavorting, I wanted to give it to her, but at the same time, she only ran one time, and I know she won sort of the biggest race that there is for the older girls, but I figured let's think a little bit outside the box. I decided to go with Have You Gone Away for Tom Morley. He's just gotten her in fantastic form. Razor sharp. I think she's got to be viewed on the short list of contenders for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint come Santa Anita and Breeders' Cup time. You look at it, she's another one. She can sit close to the pace. She can come from 3-4 lengths out of it. I think she's the kind that has that versatile running style. 7 furlongs, not a problem. And again, you got to keep that in mind. The fillies, they're going to go 7 in their sprint race for the Breeders' Cup. The boys are going to go 6. So it's a big difference. I think Have You Gone Away, she's going to need to improve, but there's no reason to think that she can't. She's taken down Karina Mia. She's taken down By the Moon. Everyone on the East Coast that she needed to beat, she's beaten. On the West Coast, it still looks like it's kind of an up-in-the-air division. Maybe you're going to be looking at a horse like Terra's Tango if they decide to stay in sprint races. But Have You Gone Away for me was the older female of the meet. Again, Tom Morley had a tremendous Saratoga. He's had a tremendous year overall, but his Saratoga was really kind of his breakout performance. And speaking of performances, the performance of the meet, I've already kind of tipped my hand. But I don't think there's any arguing that the performance of the meet was this one from Arrogant in the Travers.
Exaggerator is coming wide as they come to the top of the stretch. It is Arrogate and Mike Smith. Oh, they've opened up a 6-length lead here with 1 furlong to run. They've left the field reeling behind. American Freedom and Gunrunner are fired behind Arrogate. What a commanding performance. He won the Travers by 12.
He wins by over 12 lengths. I believe it ended up being 13 and change. And it was one of those that I was fortunate enough to be right there at the rail at the winner's circle as he comes running by. And heck, on the far turn, I thought I had a shot with American Freedom. And then this horse decided to get his final quarter of a mile in 23-4. And next thing you know, he gets a 122 buyer speed figure, and he's on the very short list of Breeders' Cup Classic contenders at this point. He's going to need to back it up. But boy, if he can run that race, he's going to make California Chrome work, and then some, as well as everyone else that's going to show up in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So that's going to put a little bit of a nice bow on the Saratoga meeting for 2016. We're going to take a quick break here on the Matt Bernier Show. When we come back, let's dive into Del Mar. We're going to go through all the same stuff, the 2-year-olds, the 3-year-olds, the older horses, and the performance of the meeting. The Matt Bernier Show. Stay with us.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
12:14 East Coast, 9:14 West Coast. The Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live. If you want to follow along and tweet at me on Twitter, @Bernier_Matt. If you listen to podcasts, YouTube, SoundCloud, DRF.com, iTunes, all sorts of different ways for you to check out the show. We just buttoned up Saratoga with the superlatives, all the best of the best. Let's dive into Del Mar on the West Coast. I think we got plenty of good horses and even some favorites as far as the Breeders' Cup is concerned. And really, that's where all eyes are pointing now that we're done with the big summer meetings. Now all eyes are leading towards Santa Anita Park and the Breeders' Cup coming up here at the beginning of November. Let's dive into it. The 2-year-old male, I thought, of the meet. I don't think there's much debate about this one, in my opinion. Klimt for Bob Baffert looks like he could be the goods. In my opinion, he's the favorite for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile right now, more so than Syndergaard, who we just talked about up at Saratoga, more so than any of these other great 2-year-olds. And guess what? This year, again, we're very fortunate where it seems like the overall feel, the temperature of the water is depth, depth, depth in every division, whether it's the older males, the older females, the 3-year-old boys. Maybe the 3-year-old boys aren't that good, with the exception of Arrowgate, but there just seems to be depth everywhere, and I don't think there's any denying there's depth in the 2-year-old division. But as far as I'm concerned, Klimt, based on his 2 graded stakes victories at Del Mar, considerably stretching out and considerably getting better each and every time, I think Klimt is the favorite for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He is for me anyway, and I don't think a gallop out, or I don't think 2 turns, I should say. His gallop out most recently in the Grade 1 Del Mar Futurity doesn't give me any reason to believe that he can't go 2 turns. He's by Quality Road, Dixie Union mare. I think Klimt, for me, he was the 2-year-old male of the meet, and he's also the current favorite, in my opinion, for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. As far as the girls are concerned, this one was a little bit more difficult for me to really kind of tie on to. I went with Union Strike, kind of by default. She got the Grade 1 victory in the Del Mar debutante. It wasn't the most visually appealing victory. She was all out for quite some time underneath Martine Garcia, but I like the way that she finished. She's got that big white blaze on her face. She looks a little bit like her dad, Union Rags, who won the Belmont Stakes, so you wouldn't think distance would be a problem, particularly then when you look at the bottom half of the pedigree of mare by Smart Strike. They paid almost $400,000 for this horse. Shelby Ruiz doing good work. I think this horse is going to be able to stretch out. And again, by default, I kind of landed on this one. The 2-year-old fillies may be the division that is a little bit up in the water at this point, where you don't really know who's going to ultimately take control and stamp themselves as the favorite. Klimt is the favorite, in my opinion, in a deep division. Union Strike is just in a deep division. I don't know that she's some sort of a prohibitive favorite as far as the Breeders' Cup Juvenile fillies is concerned. But for me, she was the 2-year-old of the meeting down at Del Mar. Let's move on to the 3-year-old males. This one was interesting because you got to keep in mind Del Mar, they don't really run 3-year-old races for the boys there anyway. You get most of the big 3-year-old races here on the East Coast, whether it's the Haskell down at Monmouth Park or the Travers, the Jim Dandy, all sorts of different races. So you don't get most of the good 3-year-old dirt horses in Southern California. But you do occasionally get a horse that kind of breaks through and announces his presence and says, here I am. And I think Free Rose did that. And we're going to take a look at his most recent victory in the Del Mar Derby. This was on the day before Labor Day, maybe? Let's find out. This is on Sunday.
Free Rose by 2, being chased now by Moonlight Drive in the Black Cat. Free Rose, Moonlight Drive coming after them. Ebaden is in there as well. Rallis down the centre of the track. Monster B running on late on the outside, and a late run coming from it, dressed in Hermé too, but they're all chasing Free Rose. Free Rose, Monster B coming like a rocket. Free Rose, Monster B, Rallis is in there. Free Rose wins.
You know, Richard Baltus has done a fantastic job with this horse. You look at it, ever since he's gotten to Southern California, he's been a different animal, and there's the hurricane out in the outside of the studio. He's just done everything right, and I love the fact that, especially in this most recent start in the Del Mar Derby, he showed that he doesn't have to have the lead. That was my concern. The speed was playing very well on the turf when he won the La Jolla in gate-to-wire fashion, set legitimate fractions. He went 22 and change, 46 and a piece for a half mile. The Del Mar Derby at least demonstrated that he doesn't have to go to the lead, and he's not some crazy headstrong kind of horse. Again, I think Baltus has done a fantastic job. Maybe this one's a little bit off the walls, giving it to a turf horse. But I think the 3-year-old of the meeting at Del Mar was Free Rose, as far as the boys are concerned. Very impressive, and I like what Baltus has also said, that we don't want to try the older horses right now. He's at Gelding, he's by Munnings, El Prado on the bottom. Take our time. There's a couple other spots for 3-year-old restricted races at this stage in the game. Why not just stick with your own kind and wait next year? You're going to have to take on the older horses at some point. So Free Rose, he for me was the 3-year-old male of the meeting at the Del Mar Thoroughbred Club. As far as the girls are concerned, Again, not a lot to pick from, but I think Enola Gray, we need her to stay healthy. You see all these big gaps in her workouts, or in her races, I should say. She doesn't really get to run more than once every 6, 7, 8 weeks, so we need to get some more consistency out of her. She's only gone out 3 times for Phil D'Amato. No one is going to argue about talent. You look at it, she's won all 3 of her lifetime starts. The smallest margin of victory is 2 1/4. The largest is 16 1/4. She's won going 2 turns. She's won going shorter. I personally think she's better going 1 turn. I would love for them to target a year-end race like the La Brea, the Grade 1 La Brea 7 furlongs at Santa Anita. I don't think they're going to try and take on any sort of company as far as a Breeders' Cup is concerned. It sounds like they're going to try open company with her coming up at Los Alamitos here shortly. So Enola Gray, I think she was the 3-year-old filly of the Del Mar meeting. Again, not a huge sample size and not a huge body of work, but at the end of the day, she won that Fleet Treat so impressively. I think she's interesting, Enola Gray. Let's move on to the older horses. Let's start off with the older male. California Chrome, I'm going to have to give it to him on the basis of 2 victories, one of them the San Diego Handicap, one of them the Pacific Classic. We'll see that here in a moment, because guess what? That's the performance of the meeting, but we'll talk about that in a bit. I can't knock this horse. You look at him, he's come back bigger, stronger, better than ever as a 5-year-old. Art Sherman's done a fantastic job with this one. He has that tactical ability. He can sit off the pace, or as we saw in the Pacific Classic, and we'll see shortly, he went right out there, threw down legitimate fractions, and went on. Strutted his stuff and won by 5 lengths. California Chrome, I don't think there is any debating. He was the older male of the meeting. Older female maybe is a division that could have been up for grabs. I decided to go with Stellar Wind on the basis of her victory in the Clement L. Hirsch. We're going to take a look at that right now.
Stellar Wind on the outside has taken a little advantage, but Beholder's far from done. Here she comes back again. Beholder and Stellar Wind, what a horse race. These two nose and nose to the wire. Beholder on the inside, Stellar Wind on the outer. Stellar Wind's gonna beat her. Stellar Wind has won the Clement L. Hirsch.
Fantastic job by John Sadler, and I've been one of the biggest vocal people about saying how we don't get to see her that often. I hate that she's only raced twice this year, and it sounds like there's only going to be maybe a prep and then the Breeders' Cup distaff for her. But at the end of the day, Sadler's done a fantastic job with her. He knows the horse better than anyone. He's taken time. Costas Ronis owns this horse. She's done everything right, and it's not as though you really go through her one race that looks like she didn't really pick her feet up. Was the Kentucky Oaks. She ran a giant race considering how wide and how far back she was in that spot and shipping across country. Her Breeders' Cup distaff was fantastic last year, where she just lost to Stop Charging Maria, and that was off a pretty considerable layoff. I think Stellar Wind, you've got to look at her, and I can understand if somebody wanted to say Beholder. I'm the biggest Beholder fan you'll find. If you wanted to give her the nod, but I kind of look at it and say you couldn't get the job done here against Stellar Wind. And I know you ran a 106 in the Pacific Classic, which we'll see momentarily, but at the end of the day, you didn't get the job done. Stellar Wind beat you on the square. I gave older female of the meet at Del Mar to Stellar Wind. And the performance of the meeting, no surprise, it's the Grade 1 Pacific Classic. They allowed him to go out there, and he got a pretty easy lead, pretty cushion, but he did throw down some legitimate fractions, 47, 11, and 1, but at the end of the day, California Chrome, much the best in the Pacific Classic.
Victor Espinosa took a confident look back. California Chrome is strong on the lead. Beholder is set down now by Gary Stevens. Dortmund on the outside, an opportunity. Homeward bound, and California Chrome is threatening to turn this one into a romp. Victor Espinosa hasn't even thought about the sticks. One of the greatest performances you'll ever see. California Chrome in a canter. California Chrome, unbelievable.
I don't think there's much denying that California Chrome is the leading light on the West Coast. Now, the interesting thing, though, is, and I find that this is going to be a nice way to sort of button up these couple segments, that Saratoga being over, Del Mar being over, in my estimation, the performances of each meeting, California Chrome, Arrowgate, sounds like they could be on a crash course for the Breeders' Cup Classic. And if both of them get there in good order, I've got to think those are the two horses that everyone else is going to have to beat, and they're going to both be pretty short prices. California Chrome is going to be the favorite, but I think a lot of people are going to look at Arrowgate, and depending on what happens going forward and who decides to show up in that race, I think Arrowgate, if that Travers is legit, California Chrome's going to have to run the best race of his life if he's going to win the Breeders' Cup Classic. So a lot of exciting things to look forward to in the weeks to come as we lead up to the Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita Park. We're going to take a quick break here on the Matt Bernier Show. When we come back, we'll take a look at the 2 races we previewed last weekend. We'll look at 2 races coming up this weekend, and then we'll give you a trifecta of NFL plays for opening week. Stay with us.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
$12.26 East, $9.26 West, the Matt Bernier Show on DRF Live. We're going to go a little bit heavy here today. Normally we just go for a half-hour show, obviously 12 to 12:30. If it's an hour, 12 to 1. We're going to be somewhere in between here today, so just bear with me. Bonus stuff. Let's go back and take a look at the 2 races that we went over last weekend. As we normally do, the handicapping preview and review. For better or for worse, we'll go back and look and see what I thought of last weekend's races. Let's start off. We had 2 grade 1s up at Saratoga. One of them was a winner in Urin. It happened to be the grade 1 spinaway for the 2-year-old girls. I thought the most likely winner going in for Todd Pletcher was Cherry Lodge. I thought a live long shot was the Mike Gorham import coming from Delaware, You-Know-2. And guess what? Those 2 hooked up along with Runway Doll, and they drove each other into the ground. And Larry Colmus, bring us home.
Around the far turn, it is Runway Doll and Cherry Lodge, and they turn for home with Sweet Loretta confronting them on the outside. And in the center of the track, Pretty City Dancer is continuing to make progress as Sweet Loretta takes the lead. Sweet Loretta is in front with 1 furlong to go. Drifting out on the lead here to Pretty City Dancer, who is trying to get by with a 16th left. It is Sweet Loretta, Pretty City Dancer still coming, and here she comes to the outside, holding Bobcats under the wire.
Had a lot of stuff going on down there. First and foremost, I understand they went. It looks like the pace kind of fell apart, but fractionally, it didn't look like they were going that fast. I thought Cherry Lodge was pretty poor in this spot, all things considered. The 2 horses that ultimately tied, Pretty City Dancer and Sweet Loretta, a situation where neither one of them looked very good coming down the lane. They bounced off one another a couple times. They're going to need to improve if they're going to be serious threats, I think, as far as the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies is concerned, particularly if they're going to run into those horses in Southern California. So my most likely winner, Cherry Lodge, I thought was disappointing at even money. She ran 3rd. Live long shot, You-Know-2, probably just not this good. She ran 5th at 35 to 1. Let's move on to the Woodward. This was a race that frosted. All eyes were on him. I thought he was the most likely winner in this spot. But I said it, I liked Shaman Ghost in the Suburban in his most recent start. He was on the inside, and if you believe the inside was terrible, the rail was dead at Belmont Park that day, Stars and Stripes weekend. Maybe you wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. He gets Javier for Jimmy Jerkins. They get Lasix for the first time. And boy, it was a fascinating blanket finish at the end. Larry, bring us home.
As they move to the top of the stretch, it is Braidster and Breaking Lucky, and Frosted is still under a hand ride in the center of the track. as he edges up to the leaders. And now, with a furlong to go, he is head and head for the lead. It is Frosted on the outside. A very confident ride here. Breaking Lucky and Move to Heeser down toward the rail. Shaman Ghost is there too. Frosted's going to have to work for it. It's going to be a photo finish, and it's going to be won by Shaman Ghost.
My favorite part about that, other than the fact that Shaman Ghost won, was that he was so tenacious. It looked like he could easily run fourth in that spot in between horses. And again, you want to talk about an all-time ride. I thought Javier Castellano rode this horse absolutely brilliantly. He saves ground for the majority of the way, turning for home. He's 4-5 path because they got floated out a little bit when Braidster floated off the rail, only to quick yank this horse to the inside. Split horses, knew that if he stayed on the outside it wasn't going to work. Conversely, I understand some people want to knock Frosted in the ride that Joel Rosario gave him. I'm more in line, and I mean, you can go back and watch the shows. I feel like this horse is a one-turn horse. I think the Met Mile was the light bulb going on. That's not to say that he can't win two-turn races, but at the end of the day, I think one turn is what he wants. It's going to be very, very interesting to see where they decide to go with him as far as the Breeders' Cup is concerned, because if it were me, I've said it for 3 months now, I think I would be pointing toward the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. In that spot, you're 2-5, and you deserve to be 2-5 in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I can't see you beating California Chrome. If Arrowgate shows up like that, I can't see you beating him. I can't see you beating Beholder. And then you could even throw in a couple other names. Shaman Ghost, I don't know if an additional 1/8 of a mile Frosted can beat him. I think Frosted's an awesome horse, and I think he's very, very talented. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a miler, and I think he's a one-turn miler at that. Most likely winner, he ran third at 2-5. My live long shot and my pick, Shaman Ghost, wins the race at 9-1, and we'll see. It should be on to maybe a race like the Breeders' Cup or something like that for Shaman Ghost. Let's move on to 2 races that we'll preview for this weekend. Hopefully we can fare as well as we did last weekend. One of them is the formulated race of the day for Saturday. That's the Grade 3 British Columbia Derby. It's Hastings, race number 7. We'll have this on DRF Live tomorrow starting 4 o'clock Eastern, myself and Mike Beer. Let's take a look at the field with the odds. And again, for those of you that have never watched the show or have never listened to it, you're going to see the graphic. The odds on the far right, not the morning line. Not anything else. Those are my odds. That's what I think would be fair value on these horses. It's a very interesting race. I think a lot of people are going to key in on the 2 opportunistic. He's 9-5 in the morning line. I made him 3-1. I think he's the most likely winner, and they're certainly going to have to beat him. But at the same time, I don't think he owns some giant advantage over the rest of this field. I think he's going to be able to get the job done. But I picked him 3rd, and I want to use him in anything. We've got a pick 4 video up, myself and Mike Beer, if you want to take a look at that. But I think he's the most likely winner in this race. But if you're looking for a live long shot, how about the 4 Mighty Mesa? Mighty Mesa's 15-1 on the morning line. I made this horse 9-1, simply because most recently was his first time being stretched out. He's a gelding, and he just kind of got a late start with things as far as a route of ground is concerned. But I look at this race, and I don't see a ton of early pace, and I think Mighty Mesa, on the far turn most recently, he was in behind horses. He was forced to wait a little bit. His best stride was late. That was at a mile and 16th. Gets an extra 16th to work with here in this spot. And there's just a part of me that thinks, you go back and look, he was forwardly placed, if not outright on the engine in some of these sprint races. I think they send him from the 4-post. I think he makes the front, and I think he gets brave. I'm going to go with the 4 Mighty Mesa to upset the apple cart, but I think the most likely winner is the 2 opportunistic. Again, you'll be able to see this tomorrow afternoon, starting 4 o'clock Eastern on DRF Live, myself and Mike Beer. Let's move on to race number 8 at Kentucky Downs. It's the One Dreamer. It's a restricted race for fillies and mares that are 3-year-olds, and we can take a look at this field. There's a horse in here that I don't love, but I'll acknowledge that she's probably the most likely winner, and that's the 3 Annulment. And I don't really want to call her the most likely winner, simply because you see I've made her 4-1. And for me, that fits as a vulnerable favorite. I think you can be one in the same. You can be the most likely winner, and you can also be a vulnerable favorite. And as far as I'm concerned, Annulment fits that bill. She's run well enough here at Kentucky Downs in the past. She ran well in this race last year, finished 3rd by a length and a quarter behind Rusty Slipper and a little bit sassy. She has every right to improve getting back to a surface that she enjoys, but I don't love her in this spot. I want to take a shot with the inside horse, the 1 Fleet Birdie. I hate that she has all sorts of gaps in the workout tab since her most recent start at Indiana Grand. But at the end of the day, that effort was visually impressive. I know she was beating a much, much weaker field, but she was close to the pace, and she absolutely buried that field. She's 12-1 on the morning line. I made her 7-1, and that fits for a live long shot, in my opinion. I've picked her on top in the video preview, or Mike and I talked about it in the Pick 4 video, but we'll be able to go over this tomorrow as well on DRF Live. I think Fleet Birdie, I know there's a lot of speed in this race, but I like the fact that she showed she doesn't need to go. Charlie Lepresti, very, very shrewd horseman, knows what he's doing, obviously handled Wise Dan and campaigned him so successfully. I think Fleet Birdie's an interesting live long shot, and I think a vulnerable favorite is the 3 annulment, acknowledging that she may be the most likely winner of the race. Those are the races that we have the previews for. Now, here's a little bit of a new wrinkle to things, and we're going to go through this. For better or for worse, this may be the worst idea I've ever had, because prior to my coming here, my sports betting record was god-awful. And it probably still will be god-awful. We'll find out. But you know what? For better or for worse, same way we do with these race previews, we'll go back and look. We're going to keep tally, track record. 3 games each weekend. It could be against the spread. It could be over-under. It could be X, Y, and Z. It's NFL season. We got to go into it. This show is normally on Fridays. There'll be the occasional odd Thursday. If we do that, maybe I'll include Thursday. But more likely than not, we'll have Sunday and Monday games ahead of you. 3 games. You ready? Let's go. Get your pen and paper down. The first one, Cincinnati Bengals at the New York Jets. The Jets are getting 2 and a hook. They're at home. It wasn't that long ago the Bengals had the most epic collapse of all time. That was in the playoffs. They're not, I don't think they're a completely whole team. You get Andy Dalton back. It's still questionable whether Dalton's actually even the best quarterback in the team with A.J. McCarron. I think it's a situation. The Jets are at home. I hate the Jets. I'm a New England guy from Massachusetts. Never liked the Jets. Never will like the Jets. But at the end of the day, you're going to give me points at home. I think Fitzpatrick gets involved. Obviously, you've got the wide receivers with Marshall and Decker. Now you got Matt Forte. I understand he's 100 years old, but he can still play a little bit, and I think he fits very well for Todd Bowles. Take the points with the Jets at home over the Bengals. I think they went outright, by the way. That's a different story, though. We're only dealing with the spread here, people. Since Cleveland Browns getting 4 points at the Philadelphia Eagles. I believe Craig, one of our producers, is an Eagles fan. I apologize in advance. I think the Eagles are a heaping pile of garbage right now. I understand Carson Wentz is going to start, but at the end of the day, you're going to need to do better than that. Ryan Matthews is made of glass. Darren Sproles, I love him. He might be one of the all-time third-down running backs in history for the NFL, but at the end of the day, I don't think he's as good as Kevin Falk was, and he's not an every-down kind of guy. Ryan Matthews, if he stays healthy, he can play a little bit, but I don't love this situation in the Cleveland Browns. I think they went outright in Philadelphia. You get Robert Griffin III coming back. I don't like him either, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have to be a superstar to win in this spot. Who would have thought? Robert Griffin III thrown to Terrell Pryor, quarterback from Ohio State way back when. Unbelievable. But take the 4 points that the Cleveland Browns are getting when they go in to the Link and face the Philadelphia Eagles. Final game that we'll play, or we'll pick anyway for this weekend. And it pains me to do this. The New England Patriots are at the Arizona Cardinals. The Cards are laying 6, and I hate to say this, Jimmy Garoppolo is not Tom Brady, and I've got to be honest, I think he's more Ryan Mallett than Tom Brady, and guess what happened to Ryan Mallett? I could be wrong. If he's not just a backup, he may be completely out of the league. Garoppolo, I don't think he's going to be able to get the job done. I think Sunday night could end up being a bit of a bloodbath. I think the Cardinals are a complete team, top to bottom, offense, defense, coaching. I think Bruce Arians is one of the best. And as good as Belichick is, and again, I'm sure if any of my friends are watching, they're probably going to be sending hate mail to me. I just think this one could get ugly. Lay the points, don't worry about it. I think it's a scenario where the Cardinals could win by double digits. And everyone on sports radio up in Boston will be waking up Monday morning and just in complete panic mode saying, oh, you know, X, Y, and Z, can't do it, can't do it. So your 3 picks for this weekend, again, for better or for worse, we're going to keep track of this stuff. Give me the Jets plus 2.5 at home against the Bengals. Give me the Browns plus 4 at the Philadelphia Eagles. And give me the Cardinals laying 6 at home against the New England Patriots Sunday Night Football. I think my Patriots are going to get waxed Sunday night. All right, so we got all that out of the way. And again, that'll be a new little segment to wrap things up. We've gone a little bit heavy. It's 12:38 here on the East Coast. We're going to wrap things up. This is what's to come tomorrow afternoon on DRF Live starting at 4 o'clock Eastern. Myself and Mike Beer. A lot of racing in a short amount of time. We're going to bring you right through. We may or may not be here for the final race for the British Columbia Derby. We'll have that up, obviously, at the very least, the Race of the Day preview. But all sorts of good stuff going on. We've got graded stakes action all over the country. Got a lot of good things going on at Kentucky Downs, Louisiana Downs, to the Grade 3 Super Derby. And obviously, Belmont Park opening Saturday. We'll bring you through there. And I believe we've got one race from Los Alamitos as well. So That's been the show. I'm Matt Bernier. You can follow me at Bernier_Matt on Twitter. We do this thing every Friday. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer, depending on how much time we've got and what else is going on. If you watch on DRF Live, thank you for doing so. If you're watching or listening, podcast version, YouTube, SoundCloud, DRF.com, iTunes as well. You can find all that good stuff there. And the way that we normally wrap this thing up, we give you the formulator, the race of the day, and that's what we've got for you today. It's opening day at beautiful Belmont Park. Mike and I took a look at the Christie Cat Stakes. That's the formulator race of the day. Best of luck this weekend. We'll talk again on Friday.